No, she asked for it. She was flirting. She was drinking. She was wearing a revealing dress. She was too confident. She walked home alone. She stayed in that relationship. She was naive. She didn't report it soon enough. She didn't fight back. She wanted it. She lied about it. She was vulnerable. She was mad. She should have known. Misogyny reveals itself in the way we expect women to take the blame for the harm that's done to them. One woman highlighting this is the psychologist Dr. Jessica Taylor, founder of Victim Focus and author of Why Women Are Blamed for Everything. She joins me now. Let's talk this through, and the idea that, frankly, women are often told to reflect on themselves for inviting bad behaviour towards them, rather than say, well, this is wrong and this just shouldn't be happening in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's what initially interested me in this topic was that, years and years of working with women and girls in the criminal justice system and in care systems meant that I had heard women and girls not only be told directly that their behaviours caused the violence, the abuse, the assault, the trafficking, but, in some cases, the misogyny was so embedded from such a young age that some of the women and girls that I have worked with already blamed themselves without anybody else blaming them anyway. So they were already brought up to take responsibility for men's actions and offences and behaviours. So I think sometimes there's an assumption that women and girls blame themselves or hold themselves responsible for male violence because somebody put that on them. But the research suggests that women do that anyway, and girls do that from an early age.
I mean, is this not just a biological truth that men and women are fundamentally different, they're wired up differently, they're physically extremely different? I mean, it's quite easy for the majority of men to physically overpower the majority of women. And things like incidences of psychopathy and sociopathy are more prevalent among males than they are women. So is this just not the case that the genders are dramatically different and that's what we see played out?
I think that they are different. I don't think that, I think there's two different arguments there. So first of all, second wave radical feminism would argue that there are biological differences between men and women that that we need to pay attention to. But the second part of that argument that you just used was more based around gender role stereotyping and psychiatry. Now, they're slightly different arguments because the assumption there is that there's something about men's socialization or the way that they're brought up, the roles that they're supposed to fulfill, that means that when they are violent and when they lack empathy and when they commit these crimes, it's seen as normal. But when if women and girls do that, so the argument that was made a moment ago was that, feminism argues that females are not, that they can't commit these bad behavior, or they couldn't be harmful or abusive. I don't agree with that at all. I actually think it's misogynistic to assume that women and girls are not capable of violence, that we're not capable of abuse, because that again would be a gender role stereotype that we're supposed to be nurturing, we're supposed to be caring, we're supposed to be nice to everyone, we're supposed to be polite. So when we do buck those norms, we're seen as even worse.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because actually a huge amount of online misogyny seems to come from women directed at other women.
I think, I talk quite a bit about internalized misogyny, and one of the things that I think is really important is that when you are brought up in a global patriarchy where misogyny is embedded and it is key, women and girls don't escape that. You grow up in that environment as well, so you're impacted by that. So you are given the same messages about women and girls being inferior as everybody else is, and therefore, me, you, we grow up also believing those things, not just about ourselves, but about other women and girls, in the same way that men and boys are given those messages. Misogyny and internalized misogyny is, interestingly, I would say, one of the forms of discrimination and oppression that's probably the most contested. It's the one that is most likely for people to claim doesn't exist or is exaggerated by women.
Yeah, and another interesting thing is now we're discussing politically about misogyny becoming a hate crime. The backlash against that announcement was insane. I was shocked to see so many men say, this is ridiculous, how dare you? Why would they be so afraid of that? Why should they be so afraid of that?
Well, I mean, if they are not misogynists, then they shouldn't be afraid of it. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's, there's lots of forms of oppression and discrimination that we've eventually made illegal and we've outlawed. And I often, it's similar to you, I find it interesting watching who it is that triggers. Like, who is it that is bothered by that? Because it would suggest that they're not comfortable with that being made illegal, and then you would have to ask why that would be. I don't, to be honest with you, I don't particularly support necessarily the concept of misogyny being a hate crime, and a part of that is because I don't think that we've even grasped how to deal with, rape, trafficking, sexual exploitation of girls, sexual abuse of girls, sexual harassment, stalking. And sometimes it feels like the conversation of moving us on to misogyny, misogyny should be a hate crime. We should be able to do, the prosecution's just purely based on the motivation of the crime. We can't even prosecute the actual crime. We're at the lowest levels of conviction rates for rape, harassment, stalking that we've ever seen. So sometimes it feels a little bit tokenistic, like it's a distraction to then start saying, well, what we should be doing is making misogyny a hate crime. We aren't even prosecuting the physical offences correctly.
Do you think that it's getting worse to be a woman in the UK? Do you think that actually the situation is deteriorating?
I think we're seeing an uprising of misogyny at the moment. So there's, key feminist scholars from the 60s and the 70s always argued that with every wave of women's rights and, that movement around misogyny, you'll get an uprising of misogyny that sort of comes up as a surge to try and shut that back down. And that happened with the suffragettes, it happened with second wave feminism, it happened with third wave feminism. And so that's something that we see, that's repeated throughout history. That's not something new at all. I do think that one of the things that's happening is that, women and girls are a lot more connected now. Their feminism is more connected. They're a lot more open. And so the conversation is a lot broader. I mean, we are having this discussion right now. So that is, a huge step from where we were maybe 20 years ago, even 10 years ago or something like that. So then you are going to get that backlash of misogyny, that anger around why women are able to say these things, that real traditional conservative view that women are inferior. Why are they being given airtime to talk about these stupid problems that don't exist? I think it would be naive to think that had gone anywhere, that underlying sort of hatred of women as being less than, as being stupid, as being merely a sex object that should be, I mean, look at the trad wife stuff. I don't know if you know about that sort of traditional wife and trad wife movement, that women should be going back to how they were behaving in the 1950s. They should serve their husbands. They should stay at home. They shouldn't be chasing careers. It's bad for women's mental health and things like that. Some of that looks like satire, and yet it's real. It's coming, right back into modern day discussion.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a remarkable and fast-changing landscape. Dr. Jessica Taylor, thank you ever so much for coming on the programme. Psychologist and author, sharing her views on the fact that misogyny, well, could be running rampant again.